Beanworks AP automation platform. Now, before we get into the more nitty-gritty functionality, we'll begin by covering the user experience and permissions. That way you have a good idea of what you're looking at. At the top level here, we have the workflow, which typically flows from left to right. Unless something gets rejected in the approvals tab, then it'll flow back into the in progress stage for whatever revisions need to be made. In the center of the screen, we have the items that you're working on, in this case, invoices that I'm coding. And directly to the left of that, we have the organizational structure. In this case, we set up a country club with 6 different legal entities. And underneath that, there are different departments. But we will mirror whatever organizational structure you need. So if you have different properties, teams, or departments, whatever it might be, we'll match that structure. And you can grant access to the different levels of hierarchy by turning on or off these bubbles. You can do this in the user permissions portion of the application. And as you quickly saw that those invoices that were related to those departments and legal entity were removed from my purview. You can also grant access at the tabular level here. So if I was a manager who only had a need for approving invoices, I wouldn't have to see the coding section of the application. I might only see the approvals. We also have the ability to segment access to the different modules. So if you have a team that's dedicated to payments, they might only see the payments module. And when you jump into it, you'll notice that it looks almost exactly the same as the invoice module. The only real difference is that it went from green to blue. The beginning of this, for the purposes of this demonstration, we'll start with purchase orders, since that's the beginning of your workflow. Now, one of the first questions you're going to want to ask yourself as you're setting up your purchase order workflow in the system is where you want to begin the process and who you want to include in it. I always recommend granting access to as many people in the organization as you can and trying to pull as many folks into the system as possible. That way we can eliminate some of the labor on the finance team's plate. You can do that by enabling the PR portion of our system and giving it to everyone in the field who might need to make a purchase. And so as a new user of the system, who's not necessarily extremely financially literate with respect to our processes, we can limit the required fields to build a PR in the system. So in this example, all I'll need to do is add a vendor, a description. So I'm going to be buying some automotive parts, the cost, so they're $1,000, and I'm buying 2 of them. I'm not going to be required to add the inventory item or the account because I'm a field worker and I don't know our chart of accounts well enough. But if I was a finance person or an AP clerk, you could make this a required field. So all of these fields and the requirements can be selected at the user level and the tabular level. Now when I save this, you'll see that it'll automatically create a PR, add our company logo, the vendor information, as well as the PO number and line items that I added to it. I can also print this to PDF and send it to the person I'll be purchasing the goods from via email, which is why we've added the pending approval stage here at the top so that nothing gets sent out that hasn't yet been approved. So the next step for me would be to submit this for approval to my manager or whoever else might be the next person in the process. So that could also be a finance person who we're going to have enter the accounts. Now when I jump into the approvals tab of the system, you'll see I have 4 outstanding items for approval. I can see the total values here of $12,000, as well as the account it's being coded to and the vendor it's associated with. So when I jump into it, I see the header information, all of the line item details with the descriptions, items, accounts, costs, and quantities that are required for the purchase, and a digital representation of this PO. I can see that this PO has been rejected with some notes here saying to adjust it. Now, if I tried to reject it as well, it would also require me to leave a comment so that the person that I'm rejecting it to knows exactly what actions they need to take for it to get approved, or if it's simply a financial or timing issue. Or I could approve it, and then it would move into the committed tab. The committed tab of the system is all of your open purchase orders. So these are the POs that we're actually coding invoices to. So over here on the right hand side, These links represent POs that have invoices that have been coded to them. If I jump into one, you'll see once again the digital representation of the PO along with the full approval history and the invoice that's been matched against it, and the total value of the invoice that was coded against it, as well as the amount that is left on the purchase order after that quantity has been removed. So there's still $2,500 left on this PO, so it's still an open PO. If the total amount was drawn down, it would close out and become a closed purchase order and move into the closed section of the system, which is essentially an archive of all of your old purchase orders. Now that we've covered the purchase order module, we can jump into the invoice portion of the system and the Create tab. So this is the Create tab of the invoice module, but you can think of it as the gateway to having instant access to any invoice anywhere in your AP workflow. Or traditionally, you might have had to search through filing cabinets for archived invoices, or look through desks, or email different people in your organization. Beanworks will centralize all of your invoices in one place with a global search that tags every piece of information that's associated with an invoice. All we need to do to get you there is either A, associate your users or entities with emails to ingest invoices related to them sent to you by varying vendors, or if your vendors are still sending you invoices via mail, you can simply click the upload button and drag and drop those invoices into the system, and then select those invoices, and you'll notice that there right now are two lines separating these invoices. Those lines represent the differentiation between invoices. So we can see here that some of these aren't the same invoice, and so we want to split them. To do that, all we have to do is click the split button. Typically, you'd have to save each invoice one by one in a PDF splitter, or scan them one by one into your system. But with Beanworks, you can do it with the click of a button, and then for multi-page invoices, all we need to do is drag and drop them. This should save you considerable time on getting invoices into your digital filing cabinet. At this point, all we have to do is save the invoices, click the Create button, and they'll move into the In Progress tab for auto capture. Once you're in the In Progress tab, you're 90% of the way done with the invoice process, because we'll capture most of the information for you. In the average invoice process, this is where the work actually begins. With Beanworks, this is pretty much where it ends. So if we jump into an invoice, we will automatically capture all of the header information for you. So we'll take care of the vendor, the invoice number, the date, due date, subtotals, totals, and taxes. So the only thing left are the accounts. If you think about that, that's 90% of the information on the invoice captured before you even started. So, and we have a couple of mechanisms for automating the account capture as well. The first is Smart Code. So a Smart Code, click the button, and based on the last way the invoice was coded, it'll place the same accounts into the account field. The second way is by adopting coding from the PO if the invoice is associated with the one, which this one is. To do that, all we need to do is click the PO adoption button, and then choose the line item we want to add to the invoice, adopt those lines, and your invoice is coded. Now, all you have to do is click Submit for approval. We found that with that combination of smart coding and adopting the line items from the PO, we can eliminate up to 83% of the data capture on the invoices. For the rare invoice that is a little bit more complex, has more line items, and isn't consistent, you can add line items and search the charter of accounts by any word in the string, and it will bring up that word. This makes coding the invoices that are a little bit more complicated easy as well. And then all we need to do is click Submit for approval, and the invoice will go out over your approval matrix via email to the appropriate party to approve. Now, if I jump into the Approvals tab, we've kind of already gone into an approval in the purchase orders, so I'll just show you at a high level how quick we can make the invoice approvals. Here, you can see a link to a PO if the invoice is matched to a PO. We can view an image of the invoice, and we can see any comments that have been left in the approval process, as well as who's a part of that approval process. And then, if we want to, we can select the invoices and batch approve them. Instead of needing to go into each one, we provide all the information at a glance. Once you've approved your invoices, they're ready to export. You make sending your invoice data back into your accounting system with the click of a button. All you need to do is select Actions, Export All Data, and we'll generate a file that automatically syncs with whatever accounting package you're using. Whether it's an installed software on a server or a cloud-based financial system, we'll send the data directly into it so you can avoid doing file-based imports and exports, which often lead to sync errors and other issues. Finally, once you've exported your invoices, they'll waterfall into the Create tab of the Payments module. Here we have a system-generated age payables list for you with your 30, 60, 90 days age payables. On the left-hand side, most of our clients create a filter for due date so that they only seek to pay the invoices that are due. Then they select the payments, it tells them the selected total or the amount they'll be paying, and they create those payments. You can think of this as taking the actions of printing off all of your invoices, stapling them to checks, and getting them ready for your approver or your signing authority. Then you'll move into the In Progress tab where you can do a final audit and open up any payments you'd like to see that you have all the backup documentation that your approver might need. In this case, it looks like we have everything we'll need. So we have the PO along with the invoice, and then we can submit it for approval. Or we can also, once you're a little bit more comfortable with the system, select them all and batch submit the payments for approval. Once in the Approval tab, once again, you can batch approve the payments, or if you want to do an audit, you can jump into them to see all that backup documentation that we made available earlier. Once the payment is approved, it moves into the Release tab. This is where we can control our cash flow and select the funds that will be leaving the bank account today. So once I've selected the total, it'll display it at the bottom, and then I can release payments. This will send out the payments via the most advantageous method available for that vendor. So if you have a vendor set up for EFT, virtual credit card, and check, you get 1% cash back on virtual credit card. So it'll pre-select VCC, and when you select release, it'll send out the funds via that method. Then it goes into the Pay tab, which is where we can sync the data back with the accounting system and mark them as paid in whatever accounting package you're using. Now, if you do continue making any payments out of your financial system, we do have a bidirectional sync on payments so that you can avoid duplicates. That really closes off the total AP workflow. That brings us to the archive and global search, which have been designed to reduce the burden of audits by indexing every field on every invoice that's uploaded into the system so that you can search them and find them instantly. For example, if I want to find all the invoices related to Amazon, all I have to do is type in the name of the vendor and it'll bring up those invoices. If you're an auditor, because we give you unlimited users, you can give the auditor access to your accounts payable system, and they can simply search for the invoices they need themselves instead of bothering your team and having your team go to a filing cabinet, pull invoices, and send them to them. All you have to do is grant them a read-only access to Beanworks, and they can find any invoice they're looking for in real time. We can also export a report from here to CSV or PDF. The PDF reports are fully indexed and searchable. They also include the approval history and links to each invoice or payment. This is a payment summary report, and here we can see the date the payment was made, the vendor it was associated with, along with the reference number, which in this case represents a check. If I click the link, it'll bring me directly to that payment, and I can see that information displayed at the top, along with the invoice that's related to it. Here I can see the invoice number, the organizational unit, as well as the date of the invoice, and the amount that was paid. When I click on that invoice, I'll see an image of the invoice, along with the full header details, and the line item coding directly beneath that. And below that, we have the approval history. This is everything an auditor might need for an AP audit. So with this, we can completely eliminate the time spent managing your filing cabinets during some of the most stressful times of the year. Thanks for your time.